Thank everyone for coming. This is CEP's 30th reunion. And we have a wonderful panels of people. So the first panel, Liana's going to go. And Liana, why don't you just take us away?
Thank you so much, John. Wow, what a pleasure, an honor. And I am really nervous, actually. So I'm so happy to see all of you. This is a trip back in time, but to me, it also feels like a coming home in many ways. I think for many of us, being with CEP was like a home for the spirit, for the mind, for the heart. And the first panel in this anniversary event is actually what it meant to us as those of us involved professionally, but also personally. And there will be other panels later today about the history and the relevance of the values and principles that brought us all together more than 30 years ago and kept us together. And before we go with the first panel, we have a great mix of both faculty, some of our colleagues, administrators, and also former students, if we can be joined by some of them later on. Before we begin, I would like to share just a few reflections from my experience, my insights, looking back over my long experience, my long time at CEP. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Liana Gens. I come from Romania. I started as Romania's country director, then I moved on to become a regional director. And in the very last years of CEP, together with my colleague Jeff Myers, we were both co-presidents. And then, as you know, the program, the organization, the network moved into Open Society Foundations under HESP, and I joined there briefly for a couple of years. My whole experience with CEP was more than 12 years, 13 years, 15 if you count the time at AFP. And I can literally say that it has changed me as a person, as a professional. I have learned so much, but reflecting on what we were trying to do, what actually were we? We were not just an organization. Certainly we were not a program or a project, as our name said. We were, I think, in fact, we were a very powerful movement, a network that became a movement. And I'm very happy to see now, decades later, that I'm meeting past colleagues, and we're still part of the same movement. We're still animated by the same ideals and values and principles. And I think what was so special about our community back then, our network, our movement, is that it didn't matter if our professors were teaching art history or international relations or economics or political science, or that we worked in the office on recruitment or fundraising or managing. We all wanted to see the same change in the system, in the practices, the same values that moved us. And that can only be done through a community. And I think that's what we achieved. And that's what we all carry so many years later. And it's wonderful to see so many of us still busy with the same. Sadly, the world in which we live in needs that kind of work, perhaps more now than then. So this was just from my end a privilege to be with all of you in that movement and to see the lives that we have changed, the lives of students, the lives of our peers in different universities, but also our own lives. And I think that that's something we each carry with us. So I think what we would like to achieve now, what we would like to do together is have a chance to share and reflect. And John and colleagues have reached out to lots of those of us involved with CEP over the years. And I think some are with us today. Perhaps Adil might join a bit later. And if he does, we'll give him the chance to share. But let me check in the list of participants if we could go with as in the program, if we could start by spending just a few minutes from those in the program, and then using the chat, we invite others in the group to share their own experience or ask questions to those that are speaking. So I turn over to Jonathan Stein. If you would like to be the first, you are probably in the first year, right, of CEP?
Hi everybody. I don't know any of you, and this is one of the things. This is both mortifying and gratifying. It's mortifying because basically was in the program for a year. I helped to start it. I was at what was it called? The Institute for something in Policy Studies at Yale, where we had this basement office and did all of the logistics stuff. And now to see what this organization became, I mean, that first year, it was, I think, 14 of us, and it was just Czechoslovakia. And what became of that? I mean, just seeing all of these extremely talented people who were involved with this as you put it, a movement for many years. It's really, even though I didn't have much of a connection to it after that first year, it's really gratifying to know that I was, sort of in on the ground floor of something like that. That something that I helped to start became, so powerful and so important to so many people. I'll say, on a personal and professional note, yes. I mean, that one year was really kind of a crossroads in my life. I was also one of the people who, who is of the age where you marry people and you settle down and get a mortgage and have kids. And fortunately for me, it worked out, and I've been, with my partner for 32 years, and we have two lovely daughters. And I decided ultimately to remain in Prague, and I ended up eventually publishing a book that was not my dissertation, an academic book that was not my dissertation, and realizing it was one of these edited volumes where you have to rewrite every chapter. And I realized that people really liked how I edited it, and they really liked the way I put that book together. But I did not want to be an academic. I'd never wanted to go through that again. But I really understood now something about myself, and ultimately joined Project Syndicate, also very close to the beginning of that project. And but I'll just say that, obviously, as the project changed, so has the country. And what I'm interested in here is to find out more about people's conclusions about what the impact of the project over the years. I mean, here I don't know that that we had how to measure that impact. Obviously, a year afterwards, we ended up in different countries. Both countries were successful. They had this EU roadmap. They got in 2004, and not living happily ever after. But for the most part, these are consolidated democracies, whereas other countries that CEP was active in did not go down that path. So I'd be very interested to learn about the impact of that. I mean, I was also interested to see that one of the participants is now a deputy prime minister of Kyrgyzstan, because the same thing I noticed happened with me. I wrote it in one of my little stories for this event, that I had this I was teaching at the social sciences faculty at Charles, which was also the journalism faculty, and so a lot of my students became prominent journalists in this country. I see them on TV and I read their bylines in the newspapers. And but a student who actually became a friend and came to my wedding, and I've unfortunately lost touch with him, and this will be a stimulus for me to get back in touch with him. but you know, he was a wonderful, wonderful student, very, very bright, very provocative, had no hesitation about interrupting me when I was lecturing, which I really appreciated because he stimulated the other students to talk. And you know, he ultimately became the deputy foreign minister of Slovakia. And that's also been a very gratifying aspect of my CEP experience, is seeing the success of the former students. I know there are a lot of people here, and I don't want to hog this, so I'll just now turn this back over to you.
Thank you so much for what you've shared. And I think what you said links very well with my insight that I shared at the beginning, that actually we were a network, a movement over all those years. And networks make a chain of impact. The impact, perhaps, we will never be able to measure, but certainly the examples of how people's lives have changed, the lives of students, the lives of faculty. Again, not just the new courses that were introduced, the new practices, but really changing mindsets and embedding into these countries individuals that were able to grow. And I'm delighted that we have with us Adil, who is our next speaker. And just to show how much we are all part of the same movement, recently I had the pleasure to listen to Adil at the Rewired Education Summit that was part of COP28. I didn't know that he was a former CEP student, but again, we are in our current work, we are still carrying the same value and the same values and the same important work. So I'll turn it over to Adil now to share what the experience of being part of CEP meant for him, both personally and or professionally, and if you can link to the kind of movement that we're still a part of.
Hello everybody, and I thank Professor Becker for including me in this panel. Of course, CEP was ages ago. It was now about what many years ago, but I do still in the impact of it. I was a student at what is now American University in Central Asia, but back then it was just a Kyrgyz American faculty under the Kyrgyz National University. And even though we had some collaboration with University of Nebraska, we had, of course, various, fellowships from Fulbright and others. The critical number of foreign professors, lecturers, and just it made tremendous impact. I remember, of course, Tom Wood. We still with many, William Hansen, Sarah Amsler, many, and I really enjoyed, of course, all those lectures. It was me and many others. I'm very pleased and flattered by special introductions that you are giving, but I think, I see many of our students, a lot of them went on, and many of them, of course, left Kyrgyzstan. They working in, as professors everywhere, World Health Organization. Many of them went on. Most of the students actually they went on to get their PhDs. I'm one of the loser ones who stayed and became an activist. All of them I actually followed our favorite professors. They became a real role models for them. And I think in some of my classes, actually, it should be another. If someone is writing this history of impact of CEP, I think one of the interesting statistics would be to to count all the PhD students that were produced from this program. So I think most of my friends who are now doctors and professors and here in Kyrgyzstan and abroad, they would and because the CEP program, most of the intake, most of the CEP professors, these lecturers, they were young, right? They were just maybe a few years older. They were young PhD. Some of them were in the process of defending the completing the doctorates, and so what inside the classroom, but we had many parties outside. We really socialized, we mingled, we and all those memories of this this interaction, this really was something that I think I remember more of that part. Not the classroom part, but no, it was a great part. Really, what critical difference, impact, formative years, formative experiences, all those words that I learned in those classes. But also, I would like to remember the wonderful student conferences that we had. I remember I attended, I think, 2 of them. I remember visiting Budapest, maybe 97 or was it 98, Budapest, and where was it? Something, another one, somewhere also in Eastern Europe. And also that conferences, those, I think weren't they the part of all CEP, or if I'm not mistaken, those student conferences. And
Definitely,
I remember, yes, definitely. So I am right. So we were there, we were presenting these papers. I remember getting some, some recognition as well there, and interacting. I remember, it was, just 96, 97, I don't know what years, and I remember our Polish, Czech, Hungarians, a bit sort of jealous and insecure. I remember one of them making a very strong introduction saying that we are not Eastern European, we are Central European. And then it's of course a very different experience now. But then back then they wanted, like, why is this, Ukrainians are here? Or like, God forbid, why is this Central Asians are here? They really wanted to have this Central Eastern European experience. And then, so for me also interacting with my fellow students from Central Eastern Europe and, of course, Georgia, Ukraine, all other countries from our neighboring Central Asians, it was a great experience. So I do remember very fondly. I believe that it was, the cost and impact, cost and effect. I think it was. I wonder why it was discontinued, because I think for many, because I remember most of the CEP teachers were specialists in the field. So for them, it was win-win. They were investing in students and they were growing themselves professionally. I do wish that this program continued and many other generations. And if there is any opportunity to restart it, somehow collaboration, now that I do have some, opportunity to support and, contribute financially as well, news flash for you. I just emerging from a cabinet meeting. Actually, Kyrgyzstan should be on your watch. We are doubling our revenue. All the words of good governance, effective administration, a lot of more financial opportunity here. and soon we will be in the position. I definitely wish for the current generations of our university students to have the same experience as I was lucky to get with being a CEP student. So there is a lot of nostalgia in the vibe, I feel, but I think if there is any opportunity, I would strongly be very enthusiastic in continue renewing it, restarting it. We need it. Thank you very much. Thank you. Mhm.
Thank you so much for what you shared. Yeah, I think we all share the same regret that it was discontinued, especially because the need is still there. And I also want to believe that actually we are still continuing it, each on our own, in our own. In my case, I now moved to early childhood development because I'm now convinced we, in fact, should start earlier than university. And I take so much from that experience with CEP, how you described the conferences, how we innovated, how we actually were able to sustain a learning community, not just among the students, but also among the professors, across borders, across disciplines. So I think it's a great urge. Perhaps we should come back as a movement and enrich it with what we have all learned in the meantime in our other jobs, let's say. But I'm also conscious of the time. So thank you so much for what you shared. And we wish Kyrgyzstan lots of success in all your work, especially around education. And I think we should move on. And the next few speakers, because we do want to finish on the hour, so the next panel can start. I would like to invite now Alexei Haran to be our next speaker. And again, if we could keep our insights a bit shorter, so we have time to go through our whole list of speakers. Please, Alexei. Alexei, apologies.
Alexei, yeah. Thank you very much. Look, imagine the time when we received first professors from abroad. 1991, the Soviet Union collapsed. And we need to understand that the situation in the Soviet Union was much worse than in Eastern Europe. Even if we are talking about Romania, and we know how tough was the regime there, but nevertheless, the West always considered Romania as part of Europe. There was no problem about that. And maybe some of you remembered how, Ukraine was treated by some governments, by some politicians, political scientists. I remember the article of former ambassador, US ambassador to Moscow, John Matlock, and the article in '94, it was titled Nowhere Land. Nowhere land. So we were nowhere land. So the Soviet Union collapsed, '91. And in '92, Kiev-Mohyla Academy, which was closed down during the Russian Empire, was finally being restored. And we received first youth students. And we also received first foreign professors. At that time, I didn't say Professor Becker, I was just saying Jonathan, and I believe the same was for you, Jonathan. And also Marta Dechok, who is here, or also Helga Hesenius, and some others. So we just reopened our doors, and the first professors came. We were very romantic, very enthusiastic. It not only first professors, but also first textbooks in political science, which didn't exist in the Soviet Union. right? Textbook in religion studies, which also didn't exist in the Soviet Union. And in the Soviet Union, there was no political science, there was scientific communism, no religion studies, but scientific atheism. And we saw these books now, we could read it, you know, so it was so, it was such a boost for all of us. I would say that we were romantic, we were naive to a certain extent, we wanted to reform everything. Some things, yes, they happened, some didn't happen, because it was really difficult to reform the post-Soviet system of higher education, and it was gradually reformed over decades. We at Kyiv Mohyla, we started with, first of all, transparent admission with no corruption. No one believed that we can have an admission to Kyiv Mohyla without corruption, and nevertheless it happened. We started with a lot of optional courses for students. We failed with introducing the system of liberal arts, which gave the possibility for American or Canadian students to choose their specialization in the process of science or of study. So we tried it at Kyiv Mohyla, but we, you know, faced bureaucratic procedures of Minister of Education. And only now there is a return to attempts to introduce this system. But we managed a lot, and I think this was, you know, great experience, because the presence of foreign professors was also the sign of liberty, new liberty which came into the country. And it wasn't in vain. Kyiv Mohyla, both students and the staff, participated participated very actively in both Maidans of 2004 and 2014. I remember that Kyiv Mohyla went on strike at that time. So yeah, a lot of our former students, they now are successful politicians, or politicians who were successful and now in a position. So, but nevertheless, it was huge experience. We were the flagman, I would say, among other Ukrainian universities to be reformed. And yes, CEP played a great role. Oh, I've forgotten to say that at that time I was also very, very young, 32 years, only 32 years, and I became the Dean of Social Sciences at Kyiv Mohyla Academy. And when I asked my rector, that our president, that, look, I don't have any university experience, and he said that that's really good, because it means that you can reform the system. I would stop here. Thanks a lot.
Sorry, I was mute. Thank you for what you shared. And I take from you that, yes, I think all of us were to some extent a bit naive, but I think we also, that probably didn't stop us from also being very courageous and trying out new things. And perhaps we managed to create change because we ourselves modeled that change. We tried at least to be the change that we wanted to see. Again, moving now, again, we invite all speakers to be as short as possible so we can go through all our list. Elena, you were both a student and a fellow, again, from Kyrgyzstan. Please, over to you.
Greetings to everyone, and thank you, Jonathan, for organizing this. So it's really such a great opportunity to have a really reflective throwback. And I put some notes so that I do not forget anything, but I'm afraid I will take some minutes to actually share my story. I'm currently professor of psychology at the American University of Central Asia, but I'm also visiting associate professor of psychology in Bard. So I have this double affiliation. And my identity in today's story is also double because I was both a CEP student and then later a faculty funded by the AFP for a number of years. But I'd like to begin with the year 1999. I was 18. I was a second-year student of psychology at the American University of Kyrgyzstan, because that was the name of that time of the school. And we were the first cohort of psychology program, and the smallest one, 3 people. And we were very excited at the beginning of the academic year because a CEP professor by the name of James Calvin arrived. I don't know if you remember this name. So we were excited because we would have an American professor, but we were also excited because of the course that he was about to teach. And the course name was human sexuality, something that, of course, we hadn't been exposed. So I learned a lot from Jim Calvin, not only about human sexuality, but also the importance of asking questions and challenging textbooks and challenging professors and writing essays. So for this course, we had to write a paper. And in preparation for the paper, there was a lot of discussions about human sexuality in classes. So I wrote a paper, and this process taught me how not to plagiarize what the topic sentence was, and other basic and foundational skills that really helped me later on. So Jim really encouraged me very strongly to submit this paper to one of the CEP student conferences. And at the time, I knew there was these conferences that very smart students would go to, but I never thought that I would, be one of those. So I did, and I did go to my first CEP conference. I know Birmet is here. This is how I met Birmet many years ago. And then since then, I would participate in every CEP student conference until I was too old to do that. And it also meant that I would actually travel to present what I think. And I really, really enjoyed that. And I still do have contacts with students who I met through these conferences. Another epiphany of some sort happened when that sex education paper that I wrote for my first CEP conference actually got me an award. And I remember, and I still have the book of art that was given to me. I think this was something about cubism, but I also got an amount of money, which made me realize that, oh, I can actually get money for thinking and writing and presenting. And I think this was the pivotal moment for me that I could actually go in that direction. Yeah, so Jim left and Sarah Amsler, I think her name was already mentioned, arrived to the premises. And of course, knowing how this communication can go, I embraced that opportunity and kind of became Sarah's mentee. Her mentorship actually led me to become a finalist of the undergraduate exchange program State Department sponsored, and I ended up spending a year in the United States studying sociology in one of the universities. And I remember that Jim would drive numerous hours to pick me up and bring him home for Thanksgiving. And he would feed me turkey, but he would also feed me the ideas that I shouldn't be stopping here, that I should definitely go for a graduate school, which I did because I knew I should listen to what Jim says. So I got my degree from Central European University, and a year later I became an AFP scholar myself. Not scholar, AFP local scholar. I think that was the name.
Yeah, fellow, yeah.
Yeah. And from the year 2005 until the program ended, I was part of the AFP family and AFP community. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It actually became part of my identity, and I still have it in my CV, so it's there. There is a paper trail of that. So resources it provided, opportunities it provided. So it really helped me to focus on my teaching and fine-tuning my skills, but also creating a great network of people that I cannot imagine myself, without. And I think it's worth noting that as I progressed in my academic career and became a chair of the psychology program, I invited Jim to teach in the newly developed master's program at the American University, which he did, and he taught there until, unfortunately, he died in 2019. But rewinding 2005, when AFP replaced CEP, I think, and two AFP scholars arrived to AUCA to teach the junior faculty to develop their research, also pedagogical skills. There were two people that I want to mention, Sharon Horn and Mary Campbell. So with Sharon Horn, we are still colleagues. We didn't have children yet. Now our children are entering colleges, and they like every opportunity to get together. So with Sharon Horn, we conducted and published research on something that we didn't think about at that time, that today we would call decolonial psychology and decolonial knowledge production in psychology. We were the ones who developed ethical guidelines for psychologists, kind of the first document of that kind, and provided trainings to colleagues from other universities. And when I arrived to Bard 3 years ago, I invited Sharon to come here and to give a talk to the undergraduate students. And she introduced me to professionals here in the United States. So as a result of one such encounter, I was invited to become an associate editor of the flagman journal called Qualitative Psychology of the American Psychological Association. Sharon and I co-presented a paper on transnational feminism in psychology last year in Atlanta. And I will see her in mid-June because we are co-presenting again. And I cannot not mention Mary Campbell. We met in 2005.
Seems that we lost Elena.
Yeah, I don't see her. I think she got cut out. Well,
Connection probably broke. Well, we hope she can rejoin us. And again, because we have limited time, there is another panel starting on the hour. I invite Phil Henderson to be next. He was my boss twice. I took his job 2 times in a row. So please, Phil, over to you.
So I will be brief, because one of the things I learned when I was at CEP is I'm not an academic. I'm an administrator, so I believe in time. And this is a very CEP thing, it seems to me. 7 speakers in an hour. John, congratulations. It takes me back to the old days of student conferences. And thanks for sending the PDF. So this is Liz. I think many of you know her. I met Liz in the Prague office a gajillion years ago. Our little baby boy, Archie, is now 27, so that means time indeed has passed. I'll just say a couple of things. One is, in many of the ways that you mentioned, Liana, CEP was the formative experience for me professionally and personally. I was in Romania for 2 years, first as a lecturer and then as a country director, back when it was wild and we were figuring things out literally every day. And then I was in Prague and Budapest working at a regional level for 3 years and worked with so many people on the screens here. Donna, I haven't seen you in forever. I interviewed with Steve Grand in some hotel in suburban Detroit. It was a crazy and amazing experience. And, I met my wife, which was pretty amazing. And we're still sitting here together. So I guess that's a good thing. I'll just add one thing just about my own recent experience, which is we've been living mostly in Asia the last few years, including in Hong Kong, for 3 out of the last 5 years now in Singapore. But one of the things about living in Hong Kong in these last few years, one of the things that it reminds me or pointed out to me is just how fragile change is. And I grew up in CEP thinking that there was a trajectory that we were just following toward freedom and democracy and, economic openness and et cetera, et cetera. And I think we all see just now in this current era how fragile that is, and it is something to behold. And I agree completely that things like CEP are part of the solution. And it's a long and heavy process, but I think many of us can attest to individual stories of individual people we met, students, fellow professors, institutions we encountered that gave us hope and optimism. And I hope to have a little bit of that from our morning conversations today. Liz, what would you add? Anything?
The only thing I would add is, having grown up with a US military father who loathed communism, to go to Prague and meet people from all Eastern, Central Europe was quite a thrill. They were the forbidden. We were never to have gone there. And there I was, partying down with people from all over. I had great memories. So that's all.
Partying down. Partying down indeed. Great to see you all. You know, Frank Dalton, I spent a night on your couch. You know, my gosh, Eric Gilder, stories from Bucharest days, so many memories. I really appreciate seeing you all. Back to you, Liana.
Thank you so much, Phil. Wow, indeed. Yeah, also to Liz's point, how different our worlds were. Imagine me as the Romania country director and meeting the American professors flying in. Funny memory, there was a young man with dreadlocks, and I was expecting a Professor Miller, John Miller. You cannot be Professor Miller. Yes, I am. So I think we all try to reconcile our different worlds. Moving on now to our next speaker, we have just a few more going through our list. I turn over to Vladislav Rashkovan, and you were a local fellow from Ukraine.
Thanks for inviting, and really happy to see all of you. And I hope also some of you came by my invitation also. And I remember the day when, together with Jonathan and Sasha Stokovich, we discussed also the idea to organize this retreat, and all of us were really super happy about that, and I'm really happy that we make it. You know, like maybe like 1.5 years ago, together with my daughter, we had a dinner with George Soros and Tamiko, and I didn't ask my daughter, but she said herself to George that the CEP has changed the life of our family, and also probably through that many other families in Ukraine. And I truly believe that this is the case. My story is pretty simple. You know, sometime in 2000. I was a master's student, and I was an intern for my master thesis. I was an intern at the National Bank of Ukraine, and as a good student, I was offered a job there after my graduation. And I responded that I don't like to start working as a bank clerk. I want to go to my university. I want to do research, do teaching, and in some years to come back to the banking sector, maybe to central bank as a director of the department. And people laughed on me and said that I'm stupid because getting the invitation to the central bank without any reference, without any bribes, it was a great luck, which I miss. And especially I was coming from Odessa. They believed it's a region. In Odessa, we knew what is the major city in Ukraine. But so I went for my PhD, to Odessa State Economics University in my town. This was the autumn of 2000, immediately after my graduation. My first salary in the university was like $50 per month. So I could not sustain for long, but I was lucky. I met Carlos Alvarez at the time, who started working as a first visiting fellow of CEP in my university. Sergei Zaitsev was that time, I think, the country director. And I started working as an assistant for Carlos, and we started teaching the first courses in macro and microeconomics in English for students. And I still keep relations with those students, which was like almost 25 years ago. Most of them are doing well. It was a great cohort of first students, and later we had also other students very well. So I also met my future wife at the university. She was also a PhD student, and later also became an AFP scholar, in 2005. And we have two great kids, so there is definitely an impact of CEP and AFP on our family as well. So in that time, though, in a year after I met Carlos, I went to study abroad. I came back and I applied for CEP LFF, so Local Faculty Fellow Scholarship, which was a great support for my salary. And as I said, without that money, I could definitely not sustain in academia for longer. And for several years together, with Carlos, and later Carlos left, we had other people, we had Simon Morley in the university as a visiting fellow later, a few other people. We did many great things in the university. We opened the CEP Resource Center, Library of Foreign Literature, place for meetings of researchers, of young teachers, organized a number of the winter, summer schools. And you remember that, like in Shawshank Redemption, there was André Dufresne who was writing, to different universities. He was writing to governor, I think. I was writing to different universities, asking for books to our library. And I was super happy when I got the first boxes, later other boxes, and later many, many other boxes. And that time we invented the idea that we want to collect as many as possible different versions of economics books in different language. And I think we got something like a 45 plus different editions of economic books. Jonathan Stein mentioned, 2004. This is a year when many European countries joined the EU and now celebrating like a 20 years together. Ukraine at the time, unfortunately, missed the European train. And, partially because of that, in a year after that, I was an active participant of the Orange Revolution. I was 28 at that time. My wife was pregnant with our daughter, and some of our, CEP students, they were living on Maidan that time, and I went to Kyiv also. I was feeding them, I was bringing them food to the camp. This was a remarkable moment of my life. I remember this, and as some imperative, or maybe like a nudge, which I was getting from our CEP faculty gatherings, I hoped to join government at that time and bring some added value to my country. Unfortunately, there was no demand at that time, and I was already that time some sort of head of international relations of the university. We managed to send 25 young teachers to study abroad, again, hoping they will come back and become other cohorts of CEP and AFP students, of teachers. And it was really, later the not problem, but it's unfortunate that the program was discontinued. But in 2006, I left the university, and became the head of department of the in one of the European banks. Look, as I was dreaming about. And in 3 years, I became the chief financial officer. I became the best. In a few years after that, I became the best CFO in Ukraine. I worked in different European countries. And in 2014, I became, 10 years after 2004, I became another active participant of the Revolution of Dignity, again, linked to European train, which Ukraine was missing again. And after that, on 27th of February 2014, like a few days after Revolution 1, I was invited to the central bank. This was like 14 years after my internship in the central bank. And I was invited as a deputy governor, not as a bank clerk. I became deputy governor. I became the father of the project for the transformation of the central bank and the banking sector reforms. This case is in the books, is in a case study in Harvard and Stanford. EBRD named it as a banking sector reform of the decade. And so, I believe me, how the Ukraine went through already through the war, for COVID first, and later through the current war, and the banking sector didn't stop any second. And it's the first time ever when the banking sector works, not needing like a support from the government, but actually it's contributing the economic growth and contributing to the government somehow was also a result of our work, which was not possible without the CEP, helping me and supporting me back in 2000, in the early 2000s. After my national bank work, I joined the IMF. I'm a member of the IMF executive board already for 7 years, and I'm happy also to contribute, to the better world, and changing world from here. But again, all of this was starting from the CEP, and I'm really grateful for that. And thank you for that. Thank you for meetings.
Thank you so much for sharing, Bratislava. What a journey. And again, it looks like we all continue on the same path and part of that same shared purpose. There is still a long way to go, as you described. I invite now Abby to be the next speaker.
Thank you so much, Liana, and I will be quick, as I know we're running out of time. I will just say that, thinking about the question about how did CEP impact us professionally and personally, there's just no doubt this is, as Phil said, I think this was sort of the formational experience of my life, both professionally and personally. And I came in 1992, and I think it was the first year CEP expanded after just Czechoslovakia, and I was the Baltic country director, and I joined in somewhat of an unusual way. The first country director, and I don't know if anybody knows the story. I don't think I ever heard it, but abruptly departed and left everybody in the lurch. I think he had about 8 lecturers in 3 different countries, and he decided to leave for some reason. And the head of my program, my master's program at Georgetown, knew I had lived in Latvia. I was working on a master's thesis on ethno-nationalism in the Baltics, and he called me into his office and he said, "Do you think you could get on a plane in 2 days and be the Baltic country director for this new program that's just starting up?" And I somehow just said, yes, I would love to. And I would think I was on a plane 48 hours later. And that everything about that experience, just sort of jumping into the unknown, trying to work with the universities that, I think as someone, said earlier, the former Soviet Union was a different situation than some of Eastern Europe. And although it was the Baltics, the universities were quite conservative. So there were many challenges. And I remember my whole year was basically spent in overnight trains between the 3 countries, putting out fires, troubleshooting, helping the fellows figure things out. We were just figuring it out from scratch in those years. And it's so interesting to hear how CEP evolved, and grateful to Jonathan, because I think the rest of the day it's just going to be so interesting to hear, because that very first 2 semesters, it was very much of a work in progress and very exciting, but very challenging. And then I did stay involved. I think I remember being on some selection committees at Yale, and I always kept CEP dear to my heart. And my most personal, the biggest influence on me personally, like Phil and Liz and others have mentioned, I met my husband through CEP, because when I returned to Georgetown at the end of the academic year, I remember calling the finance office in Prague and to look for a woman named Kate to ask about my paycheck. And to my surprise, she was gone, and a man answered the phone, and he turned out to be, 6 years later, my husband of now 25 years. We didn't meet in person. That was 1993, and we didn't meet in person. We both went on through many different roles through the Soros Foundations after that. We finally met in person in New York for a meeting. I think it was a library program meeting. 3 years later, married 3 years after that. Now we have 2 kids. And so, CEP is something that both of us really think about all the time, and how much impact it had on us personally. And I will end there to let others speak. Thank you.
Wow, thank you for sharing. Well, it looks like because it brought together people that shared so much, there were many that found their soulmates, not only their mission mates, let's say. So our next speaker, we have just a couple more. I turn over to Hans. I have so many great memories meeting Hans in different CEP gatherings. So I'm really glad to have you with us here.
Hi, Liana. Hi, everyone. It's great to see many familiar faces. My first encounter with CEP was with Eileen Rambo when I was interviewed. I came to Georgia in '99, and in my case, the causality is incredibly strong for a life-changing impact. I'm talking to you from Tbilisi right now. You will have seen that things in Tbilisi are very troubled. One young man who works with legal projects has said the reason that the Gen Z is out, it shows in the end that even though they're trying to oppress us, our work has had an impact. And these are really grim days. I'm afraid we're heading into a further escalation, but it's very encouraging. Well, just 2 or 3 highlights. Conferences were mentioned. They were great. Just yesterday, I met one of my former students from a conference, Coteviqua, and with him 10 years ago, I started a company. We're exporting kiwi fruit to Japan. We're employing 20 people. We're one of the few exporting agriculture companies to a high quality market in the world. So totally different from academic stuff. It's only 5 or 10% of my time, but it's had actual impact in helping people and creating things. Anna Dolidze was a student who went with us to Budapest to the conference. She's now a major and significant politician arguing for the rights of the people standing out there. We have a long way to go. I think democracies everywhere under a massive assault. It is what it is. We have to fight that fight. I'm very glad that CEP, put me in a place where I hope I can make a difference.
Thank you so much for sharing, Hans. Marta, you are a faculty fellow also from Ukraine.
Hi, Jonathan. Thanks so much for organizing this. I have been thinking about doing a CEP Ukraine reunion in my apartment in KU for years, so everybody is invited. We have heard so many interesting things, and it's just great to see everybody that I know, meet people I don't know. We're running out of time, so again, I'm going to be really brief. Abby captured that fluidity of our experience in the early 90s. I worked in Kyiv Mohila University where I met tremendous people, and CEP plus serendipity shaped my future career. I was a PhD student at Oxford doing a history degree, went to teach. I was just about finished, but not quite. I was in the history department, went home for Christmas, and I can't remember if it was John Becker or Dan Callingart called me at home in Toronto saying, one of our lecturers in the poli-sci department has dropped out. We have nobody to teach international relations. Could you please do it? And I thought, oh my God, you're bugging me at Christmas. I haven't done IR in a long time, but yes, of course I'll do it. So I spent half my Christmas vacation putting together a course in international relations, went back, and that's how I got to meet Alexei Haran, who is with us today. And I started teaching in the political science department as well as the history department. Fast forward, University of Western Ontario is looking for somebody for a joint appointment in departments of history and political science. And guess who gets the job? There are very few people who actually can teach both history and political science, and these appointments are kind of rare. So it was just the fact that CEP had asked me to do something that I really didn't want to do, but ended up having fun doing, that got me my job. So I'm really grateful to that. The thing that strikes me listening to everybody's memories, and I think about this a lot, the early 90s was such an optimistic time. Communism had collapsed, apartheid had ended. We were building a future. I cry every day now because Russia is killing Ukrainians every single day. And I think we as people who did make a difference then, we need to continue making a difference now. And we need to, I'm so glad to see people from Ukraine and Georgia. We need to be reaching out to them and saying, what can we do to help you now? So Alexei, I don't know if you're still around, but this is a dark time. So we need to take all our skills and help all those people that need our help. Thanks.
Yes, Marta, very well spoken. And whether we can revive CEP or not, I think we take to heart what you just urged us in whatever our power is right now, and taking the same idealism that we can muster from those days, we need to continue for sure. There is one last speaker I would like to invite, and then of course, please use the chat. We have Brian Whitmore with us, who was both in Ukraine and in Russia.
Thank you. Thank you, Liana. Yes, CEP was formative for me in more ways than I can probably recount. It started rather inauspiciously. I think Carrie McNamara is out there. Carrie, I don't know if you remember my interview with CEP back in '93. I got lost on the Atlanta Beltway and got off the wrong exit and was like hours late for the interview and was calling you from a payphone. I don't know if anybody remembers payphones, but they existed back in '93. So it started inauspiciously, but it was formative for me in so many ways. I mean, after leaving CEP, I remained in the region for many years. I was in Russia as a journalist, first with the Moscow Times, later with the Boston Globe. I then later moved to Prague, was with Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, as a reporter, as an editor, and later as senior Russia analyst after that, and then moved to Washington, where I live now, as a senior fellow with the Atlantic Council, and I'm also an associate professor of practice at the University of Texas, Arlington. But I wanted to I think there's a story I can tell that kind of encapsulates everything, I think. And some people here are involved in that story. Around 2014, 2015 or so, shortly after the Russian invasion of Ukraine happened, I got this friend request on Facebook. It was a Ukrainian name that I vaguely recognized. And I checked to see that we had many mutual friends. So I accepted the request and I got a private message from this person who said, Brian, were you by chance teaching at Mechnikov National University in Odessa in '93, '94? And I wrote back, yeah, as a matter of fact, I was. And he said, I was one of your students and now I'm faculty there. And several of your students are faculty there. And we want to find a way to invite you back to Odessa in order to see you again. And so I accepted an invitation to Odessa for a conference that NATO was sponsoring back in 2015. Marta Deshok was there. And I showed up in Odessa and found out not only were all of my best students, like the main faculty members, one of my students was the department chair. The young docent I had been working with when I was in Odessa was now the rector of the university. Not only had all that happened, but a program to form an international relations faculty that had its genesis in my colleagues in that faculty asking me, how do we start a international relations faculty? It was a cathedra of modern and contemporary history when I was teaching there. And I got my colleagues together, and Marta, you may remember this, Kate Flynn, I see that you're out there, Daniel Dresner, Sven Holdar, who I don't think are with us. All of us kind of put together a curriculum. Daniel Kallengard, of course, led the effort. All of us put together a curriculum reform workshop and created kind of a packet for how to create an international relations faculty with syllabi and with reading lists and curriculum and everything. And this is just one of these things you do in your 30s and you kind of forget about it and go on with your life. Well, when I went back to Odessa in 2015, I found out that they had implemented our program completely. And we were kind of rock stars there. We were the kind of spiritual, parents of this faculty. And it was kind of this, it's a wonderful life moment, like Jimmy Stewart finding out the effects he had on other people's lives. This was pretty powerful for me. To see that this thing we did back in the 90s, most of us hung over after nights of drinking in my little tiny apartment in Odessa, had an impact. And all my students were like, I was in my 30s when I was teaching in Odessa. My students, of course, were teenagers. Now I was in my 50s, or I was in 2015. I'm in my 60s now. My then students are all in their 30s and running the faculty, and they had students who were the age that my students were when I was there, and that was all a pretty powerful experience for me. So I just thought, kind of to get it in a sense of the impact of CEPA, I thought I would tell that story that others in this discussion were involved in at both stages of the story. So that's what I'll say. I see we're over time, so I should probably shut up now.
Thank you so much, Brian. I think your example is a really inspiring and great way to end our first session of this anniversary event. It just shows, again, back to the beginning of what I was sharing, how as a movement, we created all these ripples and the chain of impact. And I think the changes continue to still happen. And I hope that we all continue on this. I go back to what Marta said. Our work is not done yet. And I want to thank all of you, those who shared, those who joined this panel. I see that colleagues for the coming panel are here already. So I'm passing over back to you, John.